Hello and good evening to all of you. Yes, good evening, good evening. Fine. Shall we begin? Am I audible? Okay. So let's start with the topic of selection and recruitment of personnel in military. So role of military psychology in selection and recruitment of personnel. Role of military psychologist in the process of selection and recruitment. Let us see. Now, American Psychological Association, that is APA, volunteered for its services. APA volunteered its services by setting up a committee. Headed by Robert Yerkes. So if you remember Yerkes-Dodson law, that optimum arousal and performance, this is the same person, Yerkes. It was headed by Robert Yerkes and assisted by Louis Terman, and Otis Arthur. Louis Terman and Otis Arthur during World War I. So what happened? United States of America entered the World War I after a long time, quite late. And therefore, to contribute in the war efforts, they required a huge number of soldiers within a very short span of time. So American Psychological Association volunteered its services in the process of selection. They gave certain tests, they designed certain tests that could easily find out which individuals will make good soldiers. Okay. So during World War I, APA volunteered its services by forming a committee, by setting up a committee that was headed by Robert Yerkes and assisted by Terman and Otis Arthur. So the purpose was US wanted induction of large number of soldiers within a short span of time. So this committee prepared two types of tests. They prepared two types of tests which are still in use across the world. They are called Army Alpha test and Army Beta test. Army Alpha test and Army Beta test. Now both these two tests were administered in group settings. Both of these tests were administered in group settings. They were not administered individually. So these tests can be taken up in a group. Now, alpha test was a written test. It was a written test which could be taken up only by people who were literates. So only literate people could take up Army Alpha test, not the unlettered ones or those who do not know English. They could not take this test, right? So it was a written test designed for literate people, and it was a rough measure of general intelligence. It provided a rough measure of general intelligence. Okay? It provided a rough measure of general intelligence. Army beta test was a non-verbal test. It was a non-verbal test which could be taken up even by illiterates. Even illiterates could take up the test. People with no knowledge of English can take up the test. So these were the two original tests designed by this committee for quick selection of people who are fit for being soldiers. Okay? Now let us see Army Alpha test in detail. Before that, let me ask you, is the visibility of the writing on the board clear? Or should I change it to black background? It's okay? Now Army Alpha test. Army Alpha test consists of 212 items in two formats. It consists of 212 items given in two formats. One of the format is true or false, and the other format is MCQ, that is multiple choice question format. Okay. The entire test is divided into 8 subscales. The entire test is divided into 8 subscales. First one, oral direction. Oral direction. It measured the ability to take direction. Ability to take orders or direction. So some statements will be written, which will be some kind of oral direction that will eventually in the wartime come from the officer. Can you really understand what was the direction about? So first group of items consist of oral directions. In the second place, there was arithmetic. In the third place, there was practical judgment of problems. So first one was oral direction. Can you understand the directions given by the commanding officer? Then comes arithmetic, solving basic maths puzzles. And then comes practical judgment of the problems. Number 4, synonyms and antonyms. Okay? Synonyms and antonyms. Test of general intelligence. 5. Fifth one was rearranging the statements, rearranging the disarranged statements, rearranging the disarranged statements to form complete sentence. Rearranging the disarranged statements to form complete statements. This ability was measured to see if they can decode the messages. Okay. So can they break the codes? Can they decode the messages? Then the sixth subscale included number series problems. In the seventh place, there were items related to drawing analogy. And the eighth one was general knowledge or general awareness, which was test of one's current affair. Which was roughly the test of current affairs. So this was Army Alpha test. I will show you the test once again. In total, 212 items delivered or administered in two formats: true false format, MCQ format. There are 8 subdivisions of the test. Some of the questions are related to test the ability to take direction, that is oral directions. Then there were some arithmetic problems. There were some practical judgment of problems, syntonyms and antonyms, to see the command over language, and rearranging the disarranged statements to form complete sentences. This was useful for decoding the messages or breaking the codes. Number series problems, drawing analogies, and general knowledge, that is current affair. Okay? So in totality, these were the 8 subdivisions. Now let us look at Army beta test. Army beta test. Obviously, we know Army beta test was a non-verbal test. It consisted of non-verbal items, and items were divided into 7 subscales. The items were divided into 7 subscales. Maze problem. You also solve maze problem. Sometimes it comes in newspapers. You know how to find a way out by following a complex maze. देखा होगा आपने? ऐसा 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 ऐसा, ठीक है? कैसे कैसे जाएंगे कि मेज से आप निकल सकेंगे? बहुत कॉम्प्लेक्स मेज होता है, ठीक है? So how to come out of the maze problem? Cube analysis. Cube analysis. X0 pattern analysis. So in a matrix, there will be many X and many zeros. And looking at the matrix, you have to see if X form a pattern or O forms a pattern. And if they do form a pattern, then what kind of pattern is visible? Okay. So XO pattern problems or analysis. Then digit symbols. digit symbols. So for every digit, you will be shown a symbol and you have to reproduce the symbol upon seeing the digit. Basically, it is a test of your memory. So every digit will be allocated with a symbol. You have to remember the digit alongside the symbol. Okay. Then comes number checking. So you will be given huge set of numbers. So many numbers will be printed on a page and there will be a target number. You have to quickly identify if that number exists within the given set of numbers. Okay, it's like playing Sudoku. It's like playing housing. How many of you have played housing? Housing तुम बोला नहीं खेला? उसमें क्या करते हैं? स्टेज पे जाके कुछ नंबर बोलते हैं. अगर आपके पर्ची पे वो नंबर है तो आपको काटना होता है उसको. ठीक है? So number checking, picture completion. So you will be given some incomplete picture and you have to complete them. Picture completion and geometric constructions. So using normal geometric forms, how many types of geometric shapes can you construct? Geometric construction. These were the 7 subscales in Army beta test. Now, what was most interesting was the scoring formula. Okay. The scores were given in form of grades. The scores obtained on both the tests were given in form of grades. So the joint score of both the tests will be given in form of grades. And on the basis of the grade, the soldiers will be selected either in officer rank or soldier rank. Okay. So people who got grade A, they were selected as commissioned officer. जिनको हमारे हिंदुस्तान में जेसीओ बोला जाता है, जूनियर कमीशन्ड ऑफिसर. ठीक है, they were selected as commissioned officer. Those who received grade B were chosen as non-commissioned officers. Then there were 3 grades: C plus, C and C minus. These 3 collectively were chosen as normal soldiers. Okay. And then there were 2 more grades, D and D minus. D and D minus were assigned light duty in army. They were assigned light duty in army with close supervision. And people who received grade E were taken as misfit and rejected. Okay. Now they asked you separate question from Army Alpha and Army Beta test. They can also ask you critically evaluate Army Alpha and Army Beta test. So now let us see the limitations of these 2 tests. Limitation number 1. The developers of the test were ardent believers in genotype. The developers of the test were ardent believers in genotype, as they believed that general intelligence completely depends upon genes. As they believed that general intelligence completely depends upon genes. So they were firm believers on genotypes. And therefore, they were opposed to the immigration of outsiders and other races into US. They were opposed to immigration of outsiders into US as well as armed forces. So Yerkes, Otis, and Turban believed that army should consist of only American race, that is white race. There should not be induction of any other race, because if other races enter the armed forces, it will lead to racial mixing and therefore lowering the intelligence in armed forces. ये पहला लिमिटेशन था कि आर्म्ड फोर्सेस में केवल गोरे होंगे, काले या ब्राउन नहीं होंगे. ठीक है, सिर्फ व्हाइट ब्रेड चलेगा, ब्राउन ब्रेड नहीं चलेगा. ये उनका सोचना था. This was the first limitation. Second limitation, beta test was very confusing as well as intimidating. Beta test was very confusing as well as intimidating, provoking incorrect answers in desperation. Provoking incorrect answers in desperation. ठीक है, बीटा टेस्ट जो शुरू बना था, it was very confusing, and because of the pressure of time limit, the subjects answered in desperation and they gave incorrect responses. This was a problem of beta test. And third, United States entered the war very late. So United States entered the First World War towards the end, very late. And hence, the time available for validation of the test was insufficient. Because United States entered the war very late, the time available for validation of the test was insufficient. So these were the three limitations of Army Alpha and Army Beta. Therefore, major changes were subsequently made in the test. Therefore, major changes were subsequently introduced in the test, and as a consequence, therefore, major changes were subsequently introduced in the test, and as a consequence, we find racial diversity existing in US forces. And as a consequence, we find racial diversity existing in US forces. Okay. So both white and blacks fight together. Now this racial cohesiveness, that is bond between the two soldiers, is established by esprit de corps. लिखना पड़ेगा esprit de corps या स्पेलिंग याद है? Esprit de corps is the strong emotional bond between the buddies who belong to the same regiment. Okay. So they don't recognize each other as whites or blacks, they recognize each other as, brothers. So two soldiers belonging to same regiment are brothers. Okay. So this led to cementing and social cohesiveness between whites and blacks. So today we find this racial diversity. Today, we also find that US forces as well as forces across the world have also inducted females in armed forces. Okay. Initially, it was not easy to accommodate the female, neither it was easy for the forces to accommodate them, nor it was easy for the females to adjust in armed forces. You know, the first fighter pilot of India was Gunjan Saxena. When she was inducted as a commissioned pilot and she went for training, you won't believe there was no separate toilet for women. Because she was the first woman. Before that, there was no policy of allowing women into the armed forces. So the government was not prepared with enough infrastructure to deal with this issue. ठीक है, किसी तरीके से उसको एक अलग रूम दिया गया था, लेडीज टॉयलेट अलग नहीं था. ठीक है, she had to have a hard battle, you know, to get herself adjusted in that environment. Initially, her own JCO as well as the training officer, commanding officer, plus her colleagues were avoiding her. They were trying to fail her so that she, by choice, quits the service. But her father was a colonel and very supportive to his daughter. His brother was also major. And the brother did not want the sister to enter armed forces. But eventually, during a fight, she was the one who saved her own brother in a rescue operation. Okay. Today, they have created infrastructure. There is no problem with female officers. They have separate mess, separate staying area. Okay. Now, the introduction of projective test. The introduction of projective test was a recent advancement. Introduction of the projective test was a recent advancement in which attempt is made to discover the unconscious motives of the test taker. In which attempt is made to discover the unconscious motives of the test taker. So this is all that we need to know in role of military psychologist in selection process. Okay, that is through Army Alpha, Beta, and latest the projective test. Now let us come to the problem of CSR, combat stress reaction, and how do psychologists deal with this problem of combat stress reaction. Okay. Just give me a minute. So now, looking at the topic of CSR, combat stress reaction. US forces were present in Afghanistan for past 20 years. They were present in Afghanistan, they were present in Iraq for past 20 years. And during these years, one soldier had the chance to come back home once in a year. So each soldier got a leave for staying with their family once in a year. So for the whole year, they are in the combat situation in the camps, in the military camps, every day going for patrol, every day seeing violent encounters, with the terror outfits. Naturally, this will build great deal of stress within the soldier, and this stress can eventually lead to mental collapsing of the soldier, which is called combat stress exhaustion. So combat stress reactions have several manifestations. It is a series of disorders, mental disorders, that can be triggered due to prolonged stay in the battlefield. So if a soldier is spending an entrenched time in the battlefield, if the soldier is spending an elongated length of time in the battlefield, he might show up, or he will show up, combat stress reactions, which are a kind of manifestation of several types of mental health problems. The final is combat exhaustion. Once combat exhaustion takes place, the soldier becomes good for nothing. He becomes no good for fighting. He can't fight anymore. Okay. Therefore, military psychologists have the duty of visiting these camps intermittently and offering counseling services to the soldiers. Therefore, military psychologists are given the task of intermittently visiting these camps and providing the soldiers with counseling service in order to ensure that they stay in a state of mental fitness, to ensure that they remain in a state of mental fitness. Combat exhaustion. Combat exhaustion can lead to freezing of action in the battlefield. Combat exhaustion can lead to freezing of action in the battlefield, which can threaten not only the soldier's life, but his buddy's life, which can be threatening not only to the soldier's life himself, but also to the life of his friends and colleagues. If he freezes, if he does not fire, shoots on time. Okay. Or it can lead to delay in response time. Or it might also lead to delay in response time. So due to combat stress, if the soldier is not taking timely action, then the enemy may have an advantage over the soldier. सब टाइमिंग का खेल, सही टाइम पे जिसने ट्रिगर दबाया वो बाजी मार गया, ठीक है. अब अगर सही टाइम पे वो नहीं दबा पा रहा है बिकॉज हिज आइदर एक्शंस आर फ्रोजन or he is getting delayed in taking a decision or responding, then obviously he is not in a mentally fit condition, he requires counseling service. Okay. Now, psychologists engage in counseling with the soldiers, especially those who are fighting for a long period of time. Okay. I would say the common problems found in soldiers suffering with combat stress reactions, the common problems found with soldiers going through CSR is PTSD. PTSD क्या है? post-traumatic stress disorder. I'll tell you why this disorder happens. So one type of CSR is PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. It results due to shell shocks. Suppose a shell, that is artillery, that comes out from the artillery, has landed just next to the soldier and it blasts. The shock that it produces can leave the soldier traumatized mentally, which can trigger PTSD. Now, how many of you have witnessed the Republic Day parade in Vijay Rajpath in Delhi? देखा है? तो उस परेड में राष्ट्रपति को तोपों की सलामी दी जाती है. ठीक है? The राष्ट्रपति is given artillery salute by the army, and artillery is kept at least 1.5 kilometers away from the place where president will be sitting. That means outside the public zone, they fire artillery. But the quake or the seismicity or the shock, is felt by the audience sitting 2 kilometers away. मैं भी देखा हूं, मैं तो फर्स्ट रो पे बैठा हुआ था, जब तोप का गोला छूटता है तो धरती हिलती है, धरती कांपती है. अब आप सोचो, वो 2 किलोमीटर दूर में छोड़ रहा है तो धरती कांप रही है, अगर आपके बगल में वो तोप फट जाए तो आप क्या करें? क्या हालत होगा आपको? ठीक है. अपार्ट फ्रॉम फिजिकल डैमेजेस लाइक कान खराब हो जाना, सुनने की शक्ति चला जाना, ये सब तो कॉमन है, बट द मेंटल ट्रॉमा इट can create PTSD and nightmares. It can create PTSD and nightmares. Another problem with CSR, another problem of combat stress reaction is depression. It is again very common problem. Now, depression is caused in soldier due to feeling of guilt. अभी मैं एक नाम लिख रहा हूं बोर्ड में, इसमें फिल्म भी बनी है. There is a Hollywood movie over this soldier. He's a celebrity in US. His name is Chris Kyles. I've forgotten the name of the movie, but it is based upon his story. It's a real story. Chris Kyles. He was deployed in Iraq and Afghanistan for a long period of time, and he is decorated with killing of 160 militants. This officer is decorated with killing of 160 militants with his sniper gun. With his sniper gun. अपने स्नाइपर गन से 160 militants को मारा इन्होंने. Now, within the total kill, there was a child and a woman as well. Within the total kill, there was a child and a woman as well. अब मैं आपको बताता हूँ घटना क्या हुआ. The US soldiers were moving to search a building, which was suspected building. It was a evacuated building. It was under construction building, and it was felt that there was intelligence information that the terrorists are hiding in that building. It was under construction building. Now the US foot soldiers were moving towards. US foot soldiers are known as Navy SEALs. ठीक है, उनको Navy SEAL बोला जाता है. मैं लिख देता हूं. They are commandos. Okay? So they were foot soldiers. They were moving towards the building. So around 1 battalion forces were moving towards the building. Now, There were snipers deployed on the terraces roofs of other buildings, in which in one of the roofs this officer Chris Kyles was deployed. Okay, he was monitoring the path whether it was clear or not and giving information to the commander of Navy SEA that yes, you can now move ahead, you can take right now. So he was watching the entire area through his telescopic gun. Okay, वो देख रहा था. Suddenly he spotted a lady in बरखा. बरखे में एक लेडी को देखा और उसके 10 साल के बच्चे को देखा. That lady was the mother. And this bacha was moving towards the troops. So he had some doubt. So he, focused his zoom of the telescope on the lady, and he found that the lady was tied with bomb. Lady के शरीर में bomb था और वो जो बच्चा था उसके हाथ में शेल था, आर्टिलरी शेल था. और वो बच्चा दौड़ के ट्रूप्स के पास जा रहा था. The child was running towards the troop. ठीक है. Now he had to take a decision. He immediately passed the message to the commander that stop, there is danger ahead. And he has to take a decision what to do with this child. Should I shoot at this 10-year-old boy or not? Because he was himself a father. But then at the 11th moment decision, when he saw that now it is impossible to do something, he shot the child. And the troops were safe. Now, the moment the mother saw the child being shot, she came running towards the troop that she would blast off like a human bomb, killing the soldiers. Now he had to take another decision to kill the women as well. Now, out of 160 people that he has killed, this child and women produced inside him so much of guilt that he suffered from depression. He went into depression. He could not forgive himself even after retiring from army that he had killed a child and a mother. Now, out of depression, he could not sleep overnight. He developed several types of mental disorders later on. So he was given proper therapy and counseling for rehabilitation. So you can mention his name. Chris Kyles is an hero in US. ठीक है? इसको depression हो गया. Also, the family members of the deceased soldier require professional counseling. Also, the family members of the deceased soldiers require professional counseling which is provided by military psychologists. Military psychologists not only help the soldiers overcome the feeling of guilt, military psychologists not only help the soldiers overcome the feeling of guilt, but they also help the new recruits to overcome the inhibition for killing. But they also help the new recruits in overcoming the inhibition for killing. Every human being has an inhibition for killing. Have you killed any animal except mosquito or cockroach? So far you have killed only mosquitoes and cockroach. But if I ask you to kill a hen or a chicken, can you do that? है ना? यहाँ पर तो पूरा का पूरा आदमी साफ करने की बात है. So how to overcome that feeling that मेरे हाथ आज खून से रंगे? तो ये एक बहुत बड़ा इनहिबिशन है. My daughter is saying, Papa, mosquito and cockroaches are insects, they are not animals. ये देख लो बायोलॉजी. पूछो भैया दीदी से एनिमल होते हैं कि नहीं? इंसेक्ट एनिमल नहीं होता. प्लांट होता है। वो मुझे ज्ञान देके चली गई। ठीक है। And now coming to the last topic in military psychology, that is human factor engineering. HFE, human factor engineering. Human factor engineering is an interdisciplinary branch of psychology that focuses upon ergonomics and ergonomical designs of military equipments. So human factor engineering is an interdisciplinary branch of psychology that deals with ergonomics and ergonomical designs for military purposes. Okay? It introduces the human mental processes. It introduces the human mental processes and understanding of it. It introduces the human mental processes and understanding of it in designing of the military equipments. In designing of the military equipments. Human factor engineers focus on people's behavior with the objects in the environment. Human factor engineers focus on people's behavior with the objects in the environment. Okay? Human factor engineer focus on the people's behavior with the objects in the environment. So how we handle the objects in the environment, what is our general style of handling, how much time we take before we give reactions to the objects in the environment, these are the subject matter of human factor engineering. Now, ergonomics is an umbrella term. Ergonomics is a large term. Ergonomic is not only associated with military equipments, it is associated with any kind of gadget or equipment. Ergonomics originated in Europe, but human factor engineering originated in the United States of America. Okay. It originated in US. During World War II. So during World War II, there was problem with safety of the aircrafts. During World War II, there was a problem with the safety of the aircrafts. One of them being limited fuel carrying capacity. One of them being limited fuel carrying capacity. अब देखिए क्या होता है. Suppose the fighter planes fly from US and they have to hit Japan. They have to travel all through the Pacific. before they reach the coast of Japan. By that time, they used to run short of fuel. And they had no other choice. Instead, what? Go back and land in an island which is under US occupation. तो अटैक करने से पहले फ्यूल खत्म हो गया, फिर आप उतना दूर उड़ के क्यों गए? ये एक प्रॉब्लम आया, तो ये समझा गया कि फ्यूल कैपेसिटी बढ़ाना पड़ेगा. Now, if you increase the fuel capacity, the weight of the aircraft increases, which is a disadvantage. It will compromise the speed. So human factor engineers came to help. They designed aircrafts that can be fueled up in the air itself. ठीक है, हवा में, हवा टू हवा, एयरक्राफ्ट टू एयरक्राफ्ट फ्यूलिंग हो सकती है. ये ह्यूमन फैक्टर इंजीनियरिंग का ही देन था. देखा है कैसे भरते हैं एयर टू एयर? किसी हॉलीवुड मूवी में देखा होगा. इट रिक्वायर्स ग्रेट प्रिसिशन. एग्जैक्टली वहीं पर वो ट्यूब जा करके लगेगा, तभी तेल जाएगा उसमें, तभी फ्यूल जाएगा. ठीक है, दोनों पायलट को कोऑर्डिनेट करना पड़ता है. एंड इट इज अ क्लिनिकल कोऑर्डिनेशन. क्लिनिकल कोऑर्डिनेशन होगा तभी इधर से जो डक्ट निकला है वो दूसरे फ्लाइट के फ्यूल टैंक से जुड़ेगा, एंड दे विल रिफ्यूल इट. ठीक है, सो इट वाज कंट्रीब्यूशन ऑफ ह्यूमन फैक्टर इंजीनियरिंग. साइकोलॉजिस्ट work on cognition, attention, and perception of human beings. Psychologists work upon cognition, attention, and perception of human beings. They guide the engineers how to design the military equipments. They guide the engineers how to design the military equipments in order to make them safer and error-free. In order to make them safer and error-free. A masterpiece of human factor engineering was from a Russian who designed AK-47. क्या नाम था उनका? AK-47. A stands for Antonio Clenselch. मैं भूल गया नाम उनका. ठीक है. AK stands for that designer. So that designer was a soldier himself, and while fighting against Germany during World War II, one of his commanding officer was shot because his gun got jammed, his rifle got jammed. It did not work because the landscape was sandy. So sand particles entered the gun and the spring stopped working. So he was surrounded amidst enemy and he was killed. So that inspired this man to design a rifle that will fire under any condition. Even if the rifle is kept in water and taken out of water, it will still not get jammed and it will fight on time. Now, he had no support from Russian army to design that equipment. So he requested the Russian army to let him work, in an industry that was into engineering works. जैसे लेथ का काम होता है ना, लेथ मशीन का काम होता है. तो एक रशिया में इंडस्ट्री था, उन्होंने कहा कि मेरा वो आर्मी का इंडस्ट्री है, मुझे वहीं पर लगा दीजिए. Now in that industry he made friends with the local workers, and with the help of those local mechanic or local skilled workers, he was able to make the iron cast, he was able to make the steel, he was able to make the wood, and he was able to design the rifle. And in the competition that took place annually in Russia, that rifle got the first prize. Later on, it changed the face of warfare across the world. AK-47. AK-47 एक ऐसा गन है जो कि अरेबियन पेनिनसुला के रेत में भी नहीं फंसेगा, पानी में भी अगर पड़ा रहे उठाओ तो उसमें जंग नहीं लगेगा, और वो 100% चलेगा. Not only चलेगा, उसकी गोलियां इतनी तेज निकलेगी, the bullets fired by AK-47 will move at such a velocity that wind direction cannot affect the target. Normally what happens if you are firing with a revolver? You have to see the wind direction. If the wind is blowing from right to left, then and the target is in front of you, you have to keep right. Only then the wind will move the bullet in the right point of target. But AK-47 is such a precise gun that the wind velocity does not affect the direction of movement of the bullet. तो जिसकी तरफ देख के चलाओगे उसको लगेगा ही लगेगा, चाहे हवा तेज हो या ना हो, हवा कितना भी तेज हो उससे कोई फर्क नहीं पड़ता. ठीक है. So it was a classic make. Now let us see what do they do. The specializations of human factor engineering are as follows. Cognitive ergonomics. Psychologists share information about mental processes. Psychologists share informations about mental processes of human beings so that the machine designers can make machines that match with the mental processes. So that the machine designers make machines that match with the processes. This is first. Second contribution of human factor engineering is error prevention. Second contribution is error prevention. Suppose the human agent has committed an error. The machine will automatically detect it and forewarn the person that you are committing this error. ये बात समझ रहे? मान लीजिए आप हवाई जहाज उड़ाने के लिए तैयार है रनवे पे और आपने मेन इंजन स्टार्ट नहीं किया है और आप उड़ान भरने के लिए छोटे इंजन के भरोसे जा रहे हैं, तो आपको पहले से वो बोलेगा कि मेन इंजन स्टार्ट कर. ठीक है. एरर प्रिवेंशन. लाइक मेरे गाड़ी में अगर आपने सीट बेल्ट नहीं बांधा है तो मेरे गाड़ी का ब्लूटूथ स्पीकर आपको पागल बना देगा. इट विल कीप रिमाइंडिंग, प्लीज वेयर योर सीट बेल्ट, हैव अ सेफ ड्राइव, प्लीज वेयर. जब तक आप नहीं बांधेंगे वो बोलता रहेगा, इतना बार बोलेगा कि आपको रेडियो सुनने लगेगा, आपको मजबूर होकर के सीट बेल्ट लगाना पड़ेगा. तो व्हाट इज दिस? एरर प्रिवेंशन. ठीक है. नंबर थर्ड, human computer interaction. Human factor engineers try to create the interface of computer in such a manner that it becomes easy for usage. It becomes easy for usage. So human computer interaction. What should be the font size seen in the display? What format should follow in the next page? So what will the user expect in the next page? वो सब कुछ वहां पे दिया हुआ है. ठीक है. वो एकदम compatible बना देते हैं. तो man and computer, when they will interact, the computer should not be very ambiguous or complicated to understand. It should be very simple as possible. जैसे मैं देखता हूँ बहुत सारे एप्स के जो एप्स होते हैं या फिर वेबसाइट्स होते हैं, they are so complicated कि एक बार जाने के बाद आपको ऐसा कंफ्यूज कर देते that you withdraw, you exit, and you don't continue further. Why? Because there is a problem of software designing. It is not compatible with human usage. तो कुछ वेबसाइट है जिनको कि मैं तो कभी खोल ही नहीं पाता हूँ और या उसमें कुछ फंक्शन डाउनलोड भी नहीं कर पाता हूँ. Only my brother-in-law can do that because he is dealing with this digital media all the time. ठीक है. तो वो स्पेशलिस्ट के लिए शायद वो वेबसाइट है, वो हम जैसे जर्नलिस्ट के लिए नहीं. ठीक है. Then number 3, product design. Human factor engineers also suggest the product design. Suppose you are designing the helmet for the military personnel with a light on the top. Now what should be the weight of the helmet? What should be the exact position of the lights? How many times people look down and how many times people look up? What is the general way a soldier looks here and there? उस light का position exactly वहां पे होना चाहिए. These days, human factor engineers were engaged in designing several types of masks, which will not allow vaporization of your glasses. At the same time, it will allow you to breathe smoothly. ठीक है. ये भी human factor engineering का काम. ठीक है. जैसे the US Navy SEALs wear a military watch that is totally waterproof even under salty saline water conditions. ठीक है, यूएस नेवी सील्स जो घड़ी पहनते हैं, ठीक है, वो घड़ी आप अगर समुद्र के पानी में भी डाल देंगे तो वो घड़ी बंद नहीं होगा। और भी सुन लो, कई बार क्या होता है, लेट मी हैव माय वॉच, ये देखो, say this is the side from where you should wear the watch. But suppose there is a siren and you have to urgently go. You can't really, or you are in darkness, you can't really see that whether you are wearing the watch in the right side, in the right direction, or you have reversed the direction. आपने सीधा पहना घड़ी या उल्टा पहना को पता नहीं चलेगा. In that case, आप समय का अंदाजा नहीं लगा पाएंगे. Now the watches carried by US seals are such that अगर वो सीधा पहना तो भी वही टाइम दिखाएगा, वो उल्टा पहना तभी भी वही टाइम दिखाएगा. Are you getting it? Whether they have worn it correctly or incorrectly, but it will show the same time. So, ये भी HFE का, product design का example. Fifth one is usability. Fifth one is usability. So the equipment should be usable under all kind of geography or all geographical condition. So how diverse is the usability of the equipment? कहाँ उसकी usability हो सकती है? And number 6 is engineering based on users' experience. Engineering based on users' experience. So human factor engineers share or ask the soldiers who have used the machines to know what were the problems they faced with the machine. So human factor engineers take the experience of the actual soldiers fighting in the battle, that what are the problems they face while handling with the machine, and accordingly guide the engineers while designing the machine. Okay, so experience based engineering. जो यूज कर रहा है उस बंदे से पूछो कि क्या क्या प्रॉब्लम है, आपको बताएगा ये. ठीक है. So this is human factor engineering. And we conclude military psychology. And now I will begin with psychology of terrorism and victims of terrorism. So when I talk about terrorism, there are two aspects, or there are two things or two subject matter in this chapter. One is psychology of terrorist and another is psychology of victim. There are two broad parts, psychology of victim and psychology of terrorist. So today I'll begin with psychology of victims. Okay, शुरुआत करेंगे psychology of victims. I just need a minute from you. Okay. So we start with psychology of terrorism, which has two parts. One is psychology of victims, captives, and hostage crisis. And the other part is psychology of terrorist. What leads an individual to move towards terrorism, right? We will understand them from psychological point of view. Now, there have been many point of views given regarding psychology of terrorists. And I will be discussing that particular point of view, which not only looks at a terrorist as a threat to humanity, but also tries to understand the psychological processes taking place inside the mind of the terrorist that makes him a terrorist all of a sudden in life. So we will also give a human touch to understand a terrorist. Okay. So we will not be ruthless. We will not be ruthless in understanding their behavior. Rather, we will use great deal of psychology to actually understand why they do whatever they do. Okay. And I have therefore taken a paper, a research paper from a person who has invested almost 20 years of his life to study the terrorists and understand them from close quarters. ठीक है, तो मैंने जैसे कहा कि बहुत सारे व्यू पॉइंट है साइकोलॉजी ऑफ टेररिस्ट को समझाने के लिए. Some viewpoints are held by the military, some viewpoints are held by intelligence people. We will deal with the view which is, held by the academicians, psychologists, right? Now, starting with psychology of victims, captives, and hostage crisis. On event of a terror attack, when there is a terror attack, the suddenness of calamity, the suddenness of the calamity is too fast to handle. Too fast to handle or too fast to deal with. Okay. It's too fast to handle. Because of this fast happening of events, the survivors find difficulty. The survivors find difficulty in mentally adapting to the change. Everything was normal just a moment ago, and suddenly a great loss has taken place in such a short span of time that the survivor is not able to cope up with this rapidness, with this speed. They find it mentally, they find it difficult to mentally adapt with the change that has occurred. So they do not know what exactly to be done in a state of total chaos and confusion. ठीक है, उनको एक्शन लेना चाहिए या उनको भागना चाहिए या उनको शोक मनाना चाहिए, उनको रोना चाहिए, क्या करना चाहिए समझ में नहीं आ रहा है क्योंकि सब कुछ इतनी जल्दी हो. Sometimes it begins with a state of disbelief that no, this cannot happen. I must be seeing a bad dream. ठीक है. So the terror attack, the major pitfall of terror attack is, the major drawback of terror attack is it is too sudden. Okay. If this attack is slow, then people can take decisions what they are supposed to do next. People can mentally adapt to the changes taking place, but they become totally indecisive because of the suddenness of the attack. Okay. The reactions that follow, the reactions that follow proceeds through certain stages. The reactions which follow proceeds through certain stages. पहला स्टेज होता है शॉक स्टेज. Shock stage is characterized by numbness, loss of control, intense fear, and trauma. We are talking about the survivors. Numbness का मतलब हाथ पांव शून्य हो जाना. You can't move your, you can't feel, sense the hand and feet. You can't sense your body. ठीक है, ये हाथ पांव चलना बंद हो जाएगा. Numbness, loss of control. You are not able to move your body. You are lacking control over yourself. Intense fear and trauma. This is the shock stage. Second stage is known as terror-induced pseudo-calm. Terror-induced pseudo-calm. ये व्यक्ति बिल्कुल शांत है. He has become totally calm, but he is not composed. That is why pseudo-calm. ये जो शांति है, ये असल में शांति नहीं है. ये एक अशांति है जो कि शांति दिख रही है. Terror-induced pseudo-calm. What happens here? In terror-induced pseudo-calm, there is zero reaction. It is characterized by zero reaction, disbelief, not willing to believe that it happened to me and my family, and seizure by fear. Fear has seized the person's thinking ability. Okay? Fear has seized the person's thinking ability. This is the second stage. Shall I change the page? Okay. Okay. Then comes the third stage, self-blame. Self-blame and hate. Self-hate. Self-blame and self-hate. I could not save my family. So a feeling of self-blame and self-hate. Number 4, nightmares. Nightmares and PTSD. These nightmares and PTSD leads to learned helplessness, so one is unable to control one's fear, therefore one stops even trying to control the fear. Learned helplessness, indecisiveness, okay. Then comes the fifth stage, in cases where survivors are taken as hostage in few cases, in rare cases, I should write rare. In rare cases where survivors are taken as hostage, they may develop what is known as Stockholm syndrome. Okay. Stockholm syndrome is also known as Helsinki syndrome. Stockholm syndrome is also known as Helsinki syndrome. Now, what is Stockholm syndrome? This syndrome, that is Stockholm syndrome, was first observed. I'm changing the page. Stockholm syndrome was first observed in people who were taken hostage during a bank robbery in 1973. This syndrome was for the first time observed in people who were taken hostage in a bank robbery during 1973 in Stockholm. That is why the name Stockholm syndrome. Okay. The standoff between the kidnappers, that is abductors, and the security forces ended up after 6 days. The standoff between the security forces and the kidnappers ended after 6 days. So the hostages were rescued after 6 days. The captives appear to have developed positive feelings towards the kidnappers, the captors, right? The hostages appear to have developed positive feelings towards the captors and even expressed compassion towards them. So this is known as Stockholm syndrome. जिसने आपको किडनैप किया, बंदी बना के रखा, आप उसके प्रति प्रेम का भावना अनुभूति कर रहे हैं. This is called Stockholm syndrome. ठीक है. Now, in addition to hostage incidents, this syndrome is also reported in victims of domestic abuse. Okay? Apart from the hostage crisis or the hostage incidents, this Stockholm syndrome, that is love and compassion towards the perpetrator, is also seen in the case of domestic violence or domestic abuse, victims of domestic abuse. Okay. Now there was a famous captive. There was an example of a victim. Her name was Patty Hearst. I'll write the name. Patty Hearst. She was a media heiress. Okay. And she was kidnapped in 1974. She eventually helped the captors rob a bank and also supported their militant cause. See, eventually helped the captors rob a bank and also supported their militant cause. Now, in psychology, DSM-5, the latest version, in psychology, DSM-5 does not recognize Stockholm syndrome as a formal diagnosis. Okay. DSM-5 refuses to accept Stockholm syndrome in formal diagnosis. But the law enforcement agencies and mental health professionals accept the existence of this syndrome. Accept the existence of this syndrome. Now, let me tell you something about Stockholm syndrome, what happens in this syndrome. Number one, the captives begin to sympathize. The captives begin to sympathize with the captors, with the hostage takers. They become emotionally dependent. On the hostage takers. They become emotionally dependent upon the hostage takers because the victim becomes increasingly fearful and depressed. Because the victims become increasingly fearful, that is scared and depressed. Due to this fear and depression, their ability to help themselves decreases. Due to this fear and depression, their ability to help themselves decreases. And they become dependent upon the hostage takers. So when I can't take care of myself, let me submit myself in their hand, they will take care of me. So they develop that emotional dependency on the captors themselves. Okay? Number two, दूसरे नंबर पे क्या होता है? The victims exhibit positive feelings towards the captors. The victims develop positive feelings towards the captors and anger and resentment and mistrust towards the law enforcement. And anger, resentment, and mistrust towards the law enforcement. Victims begin to believe that a police action may threaten their lives. Victims begin to believe that a police action would threaten their lives. So positive feeling towards the captors and negative feeling towards the police. कि जब सुरक्षा प्रदान करना था तब तो किया नहीं, इतनी देर तक हमें बचाया नहीं, और अब अगर कोई एक्शन लेते हैं तो ये जो हमें जिंदा छोड़े हुए हैं वो खत्म कर देंगे. 1% अगर चांस है बचने का वो भी खत्म हो जाएगा. There is some chats. Yes, Kalashnikov is the name of person who designed that AK-47. K stands for Kalashnikov. Yeah, the bull. Okay, now let us see the causes. The causes of Stockholm syndrome. Number one, Stockholm syndrome is a coping strategy. Stockholm syndrome is a coping strategy for the victims. Stockholm syndrome is a coping strategy for the victims as they see it as a protective strategy. So the only chance for my survival is I should start supporting the captors, cooperating with them. तो ये प्रोटेक्टिव स्ट्रेटेजी है उसके दिमाग में जो आता है, ठीक है. नंबर टू, victim feels that the survival lies in the hand of the captors. Victim feels that their survival lies in the hand of the captors. Okay. Number third, victims perceive the small favors or kindness. Victim perceives the small favors or kindness coming from the captors, like food or not getting hurt. Okay. Small favors and small kindness that is coming from the captors in such a hopeless situation, they perceive it as an occasion to express gratitude. As an occasion to express gratitude. हमें grateful होना चाहिए कि अभी तक हमें मारा नहीं, उल्टा हमें खाना भी दे रहे हैं, ठीक है, चोट भी नहीं पहुंचा रहे, तो वो बहुत आभारी महसूस करने लगता है, ग्रेटफुल महसूस करने लगता है, ठीक. नंबर 4, the victims are kept isolated from all other perspectives. The victims are kept isolated from all other perspectives except of the captors. Except of the captors. मतलब समझ रहे हैं? They are disconnected from media, they are disconnected from news. They do not know the purpose or intention of their kidnapping, behind their kidnapping. तो मान लो कैप्टर्स ने उनको बंदी इसलिए बनाया क्योंकि अपने किसी साथी को जेल से छुड़ाना चाहते हैं. किस साथी को छुड़ाना चाहते हैं ये नहीं जानते, इनके पास कोई इंफॉर्मेशन है ही नहीं, ठीक है. अगर इनको पता होता है कि जिस आदमी को छुड़ाने के लिए इनको बंदी बनाया है, the person whom they want to be released from the jail is a deadly terrorist, is a threat to the humanity altogether, they might not support the cause of the militants. But militants do not allow them know anything about their purpose. Number one. Number two, the militants also do not allow them to know that whether their government is doing anything to rescue them. So rest of the world who are watching it on television, they will know that what government is doing, what initiative the security forces are taking. But the captives will not know that. So when you are not given any other side, any other perception, you are only given the perception of the captives, you automatically have only one perception to support. You have nothing to oppose it. ठीक है, अगर मुझे पता चले कि मेरा सरकार मुझे बचाने के लिए क्या नहीं कर रही है, जिनको ये छुड़ाना चाह रहे हैं उसको बिल्कुल नहीं छोड़ना चाहिए, अगर मुझे ये सब इंफॉर्मेशन मिले तब तो मैं आर्गुमेंट करूं. Only then I can argue with the captives. But I can't argue with the captives because I do not know anything that what the government is doing for me or who are they trying to release or what are they demanding in exchange. I do not know. So whatever they show me and tell me, I begin to believe in that. Okay? Now what happens? Number 5, victims feel they can't escape from the situation. Victims now feel that they can't escape from the situation. ठीक है. Number 6, the victim learns that in order to survive, they have to get accustomed to the reactions of the captors. They have to get attuned with the reactions of the captors. Victims learn that in order to survive, they have to get attuned to the reactions of the captors and hence develop psychological traits or tendency which pleases the captors, and hence develop psychological tendencies that pleases the captors. Like, for example, dependency. Seeking permission before taking action. And also showing compliance to the orders. Coming from the captors. तो कैप्टन ने जो भी ऑर्डर दिया है वो बिल्कुल फॉलो करना है. Number 7, what happens? Regression, which is an ego defense mechanism, takes place. Regression, that is an ego defense mechanism, takes place. क्या होता है regression? Psychologically moving from present to the past, that is childhood days. ठीक है? Because past was always pleasant, beautiful, non-stressful. So they mentally locomote from present to the past. Okay, regression takes place and they begin to behave like child. So they would follow whatever the captors tell them. Just like बच्चा अपने बाप की बात मानता है वैसे ही. And number 8, they develop anger and mistrust towards the government. As the government has yet not rescued them. And if they are alive, it is a new life offered by the captors. And if they are alive, it is a new life that has been offered by the captors. सरकार ने तो हमें मरने छोड़ दिया, इन लोगों ने हमें दूसरा जीवन दिया. ठीक है? So this is psychology of victim. Now tomorrow we will discuss the psychology of terrorist. I'm foreclosing the class bit early today. कल हम लोग सुबह मिलते हैं. So see you all. Good evening. Good night. Stay well.